What's up, everybody? Justin Nault. I am joined today by a very special guest who I am very excited about. This is Autumn Smith. Now, if you are part of the Clovis community, you're probably already familiar with Autumn because I constantly talk about the delicious Paleo Valley beef sticks and some of their other supplement products that are all part of the approved foods list for all of my custom nutrition protocols. You may have seen Autumn poking around in some of the Facebook groups if you're in the Facebook groups. So Autumn, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so appreciative of what you're doing and of you being so inclusive of us in your community. Glad to be here. Couldn't be more excited.
Of course. I got to support the good products. And I also have to say thank you too, because some people may remember that you had me as a guest on the Optimized Paleo podcast, and we talked all about childhood nutrition.
Yeah, and people love that episode. So thank you for being on that. I love your calculator. I'm sure everyone knows about that in your audience, but yeah, doing amazing things. Our audience absolutely adored that podcast.
Oh, awesome. I'm glad it went well. So, hopefully we can add more value with this podcast here. So let's jump right in. And I want to just start by giving people an idea of what got you here, what got you to be, Autumn Smith of Paleo Valley. How did this all happen? Take us back.
It's so crazy. And we were just talking about it before we started that the people who knew me in high school, who now know that I'm a wellness expert, are just, their heads are spinning because they're just saying, what is with this girl now? Because in high school, I think it started with digestive issues, like some pretty gnarly IBS that no doctor could really treat. And I saw a psychologist, and my parents spared no expense. They bent over backwards for me to try and get me the help that I deserved. They thought I deserved. There just weren't any options out there. And so it kind of escalated, and I kind of started to feel hopeless, and my mental health started to deteriorate. I'm sure your audience is very aware of the gut and brain connection. Mm-hmm. And so I started kind of really struggling, and I had anxiety and depression and a number of other issues that I started to self-medicate because I didn't know how to get out, and I just knew that I was kind of suffering. And so drinking, I was a smoker, all of these things, until I kind of met my husband. And when he moved in with me, he was a musician, and so we kind of led that life as we were talking about. We went out, nothing abnormal, but when he saw the pain I was in at night with my distended belly, I literally looked pregnant, and he just said, wow, how long have you been doing this? And I said, 15 years. And he just didn't think that was good enough. He wanted better for his new wife. And so he begged me to see some doctors. We did, even though I knew what they were going to tell me. And he just didn't take that for an answer. So he did some Google machine research, and we found that a lot of people were having success with the paleo diet. And so I was really reticent, but I thought, you know what, I don't have anything else to lose. And so we just started shopping at farmers markets and cutting out the sugar and the processed foods. And in 30 days, I didn't have any more bloating. And then kept it up. After a whole year, I felt like a light had turned on. My mental health, I had this like zest and enthusiasm for life that I hadn't had since I was a little girl. And the funny thing is, I was in the wellness space or fitness. I was a fitness trainer, loving my life, working for Tracy Anderson. I looked incredibly fit, but I just wasn't well. And so when I started to understand that distinction, I knew I had to go back to school and share my experience with other people. And so I've gotten a number of degrees in the wellness space, my master's in holistic nutrition. And so we wanted to disseminate information, but we realized there's a bigger need for products, that people who have experienced these transformations make different products than people who haven't. And so we just always commit everything we do. Health is valued over profit every time. And so that's how Paleo Valley was born. We adopted some of my family members who also experienced transformations. And we're just trying to do everything we can to teach people and empower people and teach them about the healing power of food. Because when you don't know, you don't know. But when you do, it's amazing. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I could feel it with you guys when I first met your team. I met Chaz and Matt first a couple of years ago at Paleo FX, and you guys just care so much about what you're doing. And the proof is in the pudding there too, because the fact that you got your master's in holistic nutrition, like you took this very, very seriously. And I'm very intrigued by that too, because I openly discuss my personal credentials and the reservations I have about them. People come to me and they're like, hey, I want to learn nutrition. And the route that I took, these certifications of like becoming a nutritional therapist, well, there really wasn't any biochemistry there. And in sports nutrition, it's basically still telling aerobic athletes to carb load. And then fitness nutrition, it's if you want to lose weight, cut more calories and exercise more. I found it so difficult to get reputable credentials from programs that I actually agree with the information. So how did you feel about the Masters in Holistic Nutrition? That sounds pretty promising.
Yeah, it was really cool. And it's just an online university. And at the time, I had just gotten off of a 7-month tour as a newlywed. And so I knew online education was the way that I wanted to go for that reason, but also because, like you said, you go to these programs and, you know, I love dietitians. I work really closely with one, but the things that they're taught, just some of them are antiquated. And so I found this program online in Hawthorne University, and they did everything. They aligned, you know, we had like a section on Weston A. Price and just really kind of up to date. And I was really satisfied with my education there. And I've even taken it a step further now, and I've gone through the FDN program, which I also highly recommend, which is Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. Yeah, created by Reed Davis. And he teaches people how to self-interpret labs for other people. And so I can't even speak highly enough about those two programs. They've definitely given me a really solid foundation from which we create all these products. And I think it's very, very different than anything else you're going to get out there. I'm grateful that I didn't have to unlearn a lot of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, did this start for you with Paleo Valley? Did it start with products first? Because now I see you're doing a lot of one-on-one nutrition consulting.
Yeah.
So did it start products first and then you got into the nutrition space of helping others?
Yeah, you know what? I luckily I married a genius. And so I am really passionate about people. I want to connect with people. I want to see that I'm making a difference. But in the early years when I had to like essentially leave my career at Tracy Anderson, and I knew I'm not just going to go wing it. I'm not going to say, hey, this is what happened to me, so you should do it. I was like, I want to thoroughly understand this. So I knew I had to go back to school, but we knew that we wanted to move in this direction. And so he saw, you know, things are going to change and information is going to be everywhere really soon. So we're going to need to create products. Not only that, but even when I went to the store, we could never find things that I knew for sure would make me feel good. You know, I even would eat beef sticks that were grass-fed, and this is how our first product came to be. And so I ate a ton of them. You know, everything looked right, but then they contain like citric acid and hydrogenated oil, and you don't have to label it. And so we just thought, you know what, we have to do this better, and we have to give people options. So it's kind of that. And now that I'm out of school and out of all the programs that I feel like qualify me to give advice like this, we're going to start ramping up that educational piece. But yeah, we went into the product side for 2 reasons.
Yeah, that's great. And I want to talk about I heard this on an interview that you did actually, but one of the interesting reasons why you guys went with the beef stick first. And I want to just start by pointing out your bravery, because I first heard of what you talked about a little bit earlier in this episode, but your past with kind of substances as a way of self-medication and the mental health journey that you've been on. And I first heard about that in one of your Radiate and 28 videos. I was like, wait, really? I didn't guess that, you know, and I have a very similar history, and I kind of get a pass because I'm a professional musician. So it's like, oh, he's supposed to get drunk. This is no big deal. You know, I saw your video. I was like, oh, wow. I love that you're open about it. So thank you. And the other aspect of this is, as you know, Clovis, like 85% of my audience is women. And the amount of medication is staggering, and the amount of mental health issues that I see day in and day out. So I just want to take this opportunity to let you share a little bit about what you've learned about mental health through your personal journey, and that the little connection of beef sticks and mental health.
Yes, awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you appreciate my honesty, because I just don't think there's any no good comes out of hiding. And I think I did that.
It's so important.
Life. And other people need to hear this, because I spent my whole young adult life thinking there's something wrong with me, and I'm different, and I'm not as good as everyone else. And I think that's why I'm so passionate, because a lot of what I was struggling with turned itself around when I just had a little education. And so one of the reasons we created that beef stick was because of Dr. Felice Jacka's work. Now, she's a amazing researcher out of Australia, and she found for depression and anxiety, the most protective food is actually grass-fed red meat. And I think a lot of women have this stigma, or they think, oh, you know, there's a lot more women vegans, for example, than there are male vegans. And so they're kind of afraid of red meat. And I think we all are to some extent, but just knowing that it contains so many important nutrients for your body. Maybe it's the iron. We don't know exactly what it is that is responsible for this effect, but the fact remains, high quality red meat, not conventional red meat, but high quality red meat is the most anxiety and depression protective food that we know about. So another thing that I love to share is just that there's 3 things actually. When it comes to your mental health, I'm not ever going to say that this is the only thing you'll ever need to address,
Mm.
because there's other things. But when you know about this, I've become really good at kind of understanding food has consequences. And so a lot of times mental health issues are just inflammation. There could be inflammation in your brain. Yeah. So it's often inflammation. It's often nutrient deficiency. I heard this crazy account of a woman who was actually deemed psychotic. She had electroconvulsive therapy, all of these treatments, and no one could help her. And she kind of became catatonic, which just means unresponsive. And so they took her to this awesome clinic, and then she had a B12 deficiency. And they treated her with vitamin B12, which is highly implicated in mental health, which a lot of people, I'd say 50% of America, is actually deficient in. And she made a full recovery. So that's crazy. And the third little piece that I like to share is that blood sugar imbalance often masquerades as mental health issues. So I noticed it myself, like I have not been doing a very good job lately on my diet. I had a wedding and it kind of like, I just got off course, and my mental health, I noticed I have just these dips. But now that I know, like, oh, yep, that's what it is. It doesn't need to spiral, and I don't need to get in that shelf or that shame cycle, or I don't need antidepressants or whatever. I know, oh, okay, my blood sugar is out of whack and I got to work on getting it fixed. So I think making sure you're including high quality animal products, make sure you're getting sugar and processed foods out of your diet. I even love for people to experiment with at least 30 days, no caffeine and no alcohol too. Both of those can definitely set your blood sugar off in the wrong direction. Not saying everyone will always have to eliminate caffeine, but I can't even tell you the amount of people who that has helped, and they had no idea. They never thought they'd have a problem. But I would come home after drinking even green tea when I was a fitness trainer, and I would just kind of like lump over and cry, and I didn't know why. And I thought, you know what, I need antidepressants. And I didn't. I kicked the caffeine habit and was much more stable. And the scary thing about antidepressants is, I mean, I know there's some people who think that they do wonders, and I don't doubt that. But what I do think is a little bit scary is the prevalence. I think 1 in 4 women in the prime of their lives are on it. Children are taking them, and we know that there's an increased risk of aggression and suicide and homicide, and these drug companies know that. And it's not necessarily that it's completed suicide, but suicide attempts, which is even scarier. And I just felt like a zombie. I remember I did go that route because, like I said, I didn't have a lot of options, but my head would go down on my desk. I really felt like I had one thought an hour, and all of my emotions were dimmed to the point where I wasn't even myself. And even though I was having hard feelings or like struggled at that time, I think we need to just get curious. If that's one takeaway, like rather than anything else, just listening to your body's feedback and remembering sometimes feelings are here to guide us in a totally new direction. Yeah. And so usually 70% of depression actually lifts on its own after about a year. So I think hopefully one day, if we can use dietary therapy, I wrote my thesis on dietary strategies for anxiety and depression. So if we can get that in there before we go the antidepressant route, I think so many people are going to be empowered and so many lives are going to be changed. So.
Well, and even on the flip side of that, a lot of the fear comes with the all or nothing approach. So to give you an example, I have a male client that I just talked about. He's about 30 years old. And he gave me permission to share this. I won't mention his name, but he got prescribed antidepressants when he was 8 years old. So he's been on them his entire childhood, all through teen years, all through his adult life. And like you said, with the vegan diet, it could be a B12 deficiency. So there's that issue there, but the fear, I think, comes with this all or nothing approach where neither of us by any means are saying, hey, if you're on an antidepressant, get off of it. I'm not saying that at all, but it's just understanding that let's make the dietary changes and the lifestyle interventions first. And if you decide for yourself that you want to kind of taper this thing off, it's probably going to make things a whole lot easier. Let's remove some of the problematic foods, focus on gut health. Then as you decrease your dose, maybe it will be a little bit easier than it would have been if you just decided to say, hey, cold turkey, I'm going to come off this thing,
Yeah. Oh my gosh, 100%. Yeah, you have to. And I think Dr. Kelly Rogan, I know we're both big, huge fans. And if you're needing someone or some guidance in this area, I highly recommend it. But she always starts 30 days with paleo, non-negotiable. That's where you begin. And yeah, tapering is a serious thing, and you definitely want help when you do that. But definitely something to consider. You can make the dietary changes on your own, and I bet you will start feeling better. Then you find an open-minded doctor, psychiatrist, or you check out Dr. Kelly Brogan for advice if you want to go further. But yeah, like you said, thinking about it, just knowing that it changes the architecture of the brain in really quickly, I think within a number of hours. And so there are long-term consequences. And we do know that no human study has ever shown depression is the result of a serotonin deficiency.
Never.
Or, never. And so we all just need to start questioning and getting really curious, not only about what we're putting into our bodies, but how our body is responding to what we're doing, and using those as kind of like divine messages, like, okay, listen, and what can I find out about myself, and how can I apply that to my life to move in a positive direction? So that's been the big game changer for me.
Absolutely. And I love the way that you talk about this. I saw one of your recent videos in the Radiate and 28 Facebook group, which is great, by the way, talking about this thing where, hey, you're a couple of weeks in and you may want to cheat, right? So we know, especially if you study the work of Kelly Brogan, it's like dealing with with depression, probably gut health. Thyroid probably ties to gut health. Gallbladder, probably gut health. Skin conditions, probably gut health. And what people don't realize, Chris Kresser's talked about this before, is like if let's say you're celiac disease and you're dealing with something like hypothyroidism, you cheat and have a gluten-filled meal once, you can have an autoimmune response for 6 months. So it's like 30 days is very little to ask, when you're really trying to heal that gut. So speaking of gut health, I want to learn some of the tips and tricks that you have learned for gut health and talk about fermented beef sticks and the added bonus there. So let's see how this all ties in.
Okay, cool. Yeah, as far as gut health, I mean, gut health is tied to everything these days, and I'm so passionate about it because healing my own gut, I mean, obviously, you've heard my story, but I say, when it comes to gut health, I say gluten. It just has to go because we all know about zonulin. Like you said, you can have an antibody reaction. And the funny thing is, a lot of people are like, you know what, I don't have a problem with gluten, but I've actually worked with someone who had a reaction, like a migraine reaction, 10 days later. And so you have to understand these reactions are not immediate, and sometimes but we do know sometimes it can manifest in ways that you're not anticipating. What we do know is that in everyone who consumes it, this is Dr. Alessio Fasano's research, there is an issue. It doesn't it doesn't mean it's going to cause a disease in you, but you are tearing at that gut lining. And I don't know, is your audience familiar with what happens in leaky gut?
Absolutely. Yeah. We've gone deep into lectins and leaky gut and all the issues, and the work of Dr. Stephen Gundry as well, which I'm a big fan of.
Okay, cool. So yeah, you probably have the diets on point kind of thing down, which is awesome. And then another thing, have you talked about the testing for leaky gut?
Actually, I would love to talk to you about that. I'm only familiar with a couple, so I'd love to get your take on this.
Oh yeah. So the leaky gut testing, well, the one that I was trained on is in the intestinal permeability. It's kind of the gold standard with you drink a sugary water beverage, and then they measure the levels of these sugar molecules. And if they're pretty high, and they're getting through of lactulose, for example, we know that you have intestinal permeability. We can also find out if it's getting through the mannitol, that maybe you don't have, like, there's these sea anemone-like things on your small intestine. They're called enterocytes, or on your enterocytes, they're called microvilli. And so they're responsible for absorbing all of the nutrients. And when they're flattened out, because you are constantly exposing your gut to things like gluten, they don't absorb anymore. And so you can find out if you have, it's called a blunted brush border, and you're unable to absorb anything, or also if you have that leaky gut scenario, which just means your immune system is going to be on chronically activated, and you're going to have inflammation. So I like that test. The other thing I've also found really helpful in terms of gut health is actually testing for pathogens. Have you talked about this too?
I have not, no.
Oh, okay. So I think, yes, healing and sealing the gut lining with things like glutamine, with things like colostrum, with taking really highly anti-inflammatory herbs like turmeric. I really prefer bitters over digestive enzymes. I think digestive enzymes work well too, but bitters, if you can do them, actually stimulate your body's HCl production and just allow your body to do it yourself. And a really high quality probiotic. I'm sure you like Just Thrive. Yeah?
Yeah, I do. Yep.
Okay, so cool. So all of those things. I think you need several months doing that if you have extensive gut damage. But what you also have to look for is, pathogens. Do you have a bacterial overgrowth like H. pylori? Do you have parasites hanging out in there? I used to have one called Blastocystis hominis. And do you have, yeast overgrowth like Candida?
Yeah.
And so if you can identify these issues, because these can be the result or they can cause gut damage as well. And I don't know, I think people just think, okay, well, I'm just going to take some herbs and some supplements and do a gut healing protocol. And I think that's a start. But if you're not there by the end, and if you're still feeling weird, I would definitely have that testing. BioHealth does a really nice one. There's also something called the GI map, which is a relatively new test that I know people are really seeing a lot of success with. So, and also in terms of like, I always love to talk about food sensitivity because it really helped me. I had skin breakouts despite the fact that I had nailed my paleo diet, or I had thought I did at that point. And then I elucidated that I was sensitive to garlic. And so I do think there's a place for that. And I think it's really important, but I would do it after you've healed your gut, after you've pathogens and all of that stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, I found that with food sensitivities too, that if you have an underlying leaky gut issue and don't address that and do a food sensitivity test, you can get false positives because you have intestinal permeability. So something that you said that I think is interesting. So you could, with this testing, and I love hearing about additional testings and additional companies, because I was familiar with Cyrex, their intestinal permeability, Genova Diagnostics. I've actually had the Genova Diagnostics full GI map before. So
nice.
So you're saying you could actually test negative for leaky gut, but still have significant malabsorption issues?
You know what? No, that's the two different markers. There's the lactulose and then there's the mannitol. So it will just tell you more specifically, like you can get more specific than, okay, your gut's leaky. You can also see, okay, are those little sea anemone microvilli things, are they flattened? And am I probably having a problem with absorption?
Gotcha.
So, because, leaky gut's two-pronged in that it will cause inflammation because your immune system will constantly be active and because things are getting through that are not supposed to be getting through. But this is just showing, and you're not absorbing well on top of it. So,
beautiful. I'm learning so much. I love this. This is great.
Yay. Oh, and I wanted to say too, on fermented foods, huge part of that healing of leaky gut. Obviously, I like to always check that you don't have Candida and you don't have SIBO. But for everyone else, I can't even. They contain like trillions of these positive beneficial bacteria as compared to, you're going to take a probiotic supplement and they're going to contain maybe billions. Maybe they're not even getting through the digestive tract. I mean, if you're taking something like Megaspore Biotic or Just Thrive, we love those. I know that they've been tested. But food is a really, really easy way. You can make it yourself. And our beef sticks, because they're fermented, they are also a really nice way to get these amazing probiotic bacteria into your belly on a daily basis. So
that's what I wanted to touch on, your flagship, the fermented beef sticks, because it really is. Fermented foods, like I am a sauerkraut fiend, and it just like they make supplements look like child's play. It's just not even comparable,
Isn't it amazing? And just like a little spoonful a day. You don't even have to necessarily enjoy them, because I wish, as much as I love my microbiome, I don't really love sauerkraut, but there's like this ginger raw sauerkraut I can get in the refrigerator section too. Just a little spoonful. That's all it takes every day. Yeah. And you're doing amazing things for your bacterial populations.
Absolutely. So back to I want to keep loving on your products. So let's talk about, we've chatted about this in person, even when we first met, about just transparency in companies. So I want to talk about the difference. You came out with these incredible beef sticks and you were really fed up, as was I, with some of the labeling practices and the sneaky ways people can slip in ingredients, the way you talk about citric acid. So let's talk about a few of these things and then just what you like to see in labeling in terms of transparency and how you guys treat your labeling.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so there's three big things I want to talk about. The first is citric acid. And so in our first beef stick, I have the best of intentions, and we still made one that contained the citric acid because we just didn't know. But upon further examination, I was kind of just like, no, we really need to know exactly what this is. We found out that citric acid, it sounds like, oh yeah, it's derived from lemons, limes, it's okay. But usually it's derived from GMOs. And then it's coated in hydrogenated oil, which everyone knows is terrible for you. And just because it has to melt in the product at a certain time. So basically there are these little beads, you put them on the meat, and that it melts at a certain temperature to preserve the product and lower the pH. So this is just industry standard. And basically you don't have to label it. It just says citric acid or lactic acid. And so I begged people to do it differently. I literally made about 100, maybe 200 phone calls to different manufacturers around the country. No one wants to ferment beef sticks because they take 4 times as long. It's not as lucrative. And so we had a really hard time, but basically that's why we ferment our sticks. And yes, it is not, we're not making the big bucks off of it, but that's not the point for us. So anytime you see citric acid or lactic acid on your beef stick, which you'll see pretty much every other beef stick on the market, it's just something to think about. Like, now that you can't ever eat it, just something to think, is that something I want to put in my body? The second thing is always, and the reason our products come about is because we're always like, we're dissatisfied with the way they're being done elsewhere. Yeah. So for vitamin C, I love vitamin C. Speaking of mental health, it has made an incredible difference in my life when I've gotten my vitamin C stores up. And so most vitamin C is actually derived from GMO corn syrup, and it comes from China. So again, we were like, no way. And the thing is, ascorbic acid, which is the vitamin C that you're going to find, is just one part of the vitamin C complex. And so what we did, we were like, we need to find a food that has high amounts of vitamin C, which we found unripe acerola cherry. So acerola cherry already has way more vitamin C than an orange, but unripe is different because when things get ripe, they start to lose nutrients. And so we found it, unripe acerola cherry has 126 times more vitamin C than an orange. Then we added some camu and some amla berry and created this essential vitamin C complex that is just food. And it contains all of those other elements, those cofactors, those bioflavonoids, everything that your body needs to actually use it. And so that's our vitamin C. The last one I want to talk about is our collagen powder. And we love collagen because I'm an aging lady and I would love to have all the benefits: hair, skin, nails, you got it, cellulite reduction. I love it. The gut healing benefits, your liver. I don't think a lot of people know, but for your liver, all those amino acids are very, very helpful. And everybody needs liver support in today's society. So we were like, okay, we got to find out who's doing this the best, because we want to make one. But what we did, we called on the manufacturers, and there's not a lot of people making collagen out there, but we called them and we'd always say, okay, so is it grass-fed and grass finished? And they say, oh, well, it's grass fed, but not grass finished. Like no one's really grass finishing. And what happens when it's not grass finished is the final product, we know with beef, is higher in like the fatty acids that actually cause inflammation. So omega-6 fatty acids. Yeah, and lower in antioxidants. Right. So this is a big deal to us. And so we were not satisfied with it. Again, grass-fed is an unregulated term. Sad thing is, even cows that go to feedlots are grass-fed for the first few months of their life. So you just have to be really, really careful. We found a company in Germany who is doing things better, and grass-fed, grass-finished, all the stuff. And then that's how we created our collagen powder. And what I like to see on labels is the sad thing is, a lot of times I have to call the companies. And I know that sounds like a lot of work, but once you find a company that you can kind of trust and that you know doesn't cut corners, but basically, are they ever fed grain is a question I would ask in the collagen realm. You can see on the beef sticks, the citric acid is in there. And when it comes to like a vitamin C, if it just says ascorbic acid, you're going to kind of want, or for my sake, I know there are benefits and some people do take ascorbic acid with good results, but I've also heard people getting rashes because they have a corn sensitivity. So you want something like a whole food vitamin C, and you just want to see the berries on there, because it doesn't, even if it's a whole food based supplement, that doesn't mean it only contains whole foods. And if it's food based, it only needs 10% of it to come from whole foods. So there's a lot of factors. Well, what I recommend is don't be afraid to get on the phone and ask the stupid questions. That's what I've been doing for the last 5 years. And now I think I'm finally getting a handle on how this all works. But basically, there are no stupid questions, looking at the labels and just being really curious.
Yeah, of course. And I love that you guys came out with the vitamin C complex. I know that you're working again on the super greens, and also wanted to chat about the organ complex as well, because something so anytime I have a female that I can talk to who really understands the depth of this in the nutrition space, you mentioned the words micronutrient deficiency. So when
Oh,
I have an opportunity, I purposefully belabor this point because I'm just going to give you a quick backstory. So I've now worked with over 500 clients one-on-one, just doing health coaching, nutrition consulting, right? I have never had a woman come to me who was, and this includes obese women. I've never had a woman come to me who is eating too much food. It just doesn't happen. It's this ridiculous brainwashing that won't go away, that less calories equals weight loss. So I have these obese women coming to me that are eating 800 or 900 calories a day. It's full-blown starvation diets. So I just want to get your thoughts while we have you here on this micronutrient deficiency, particularly in women, and just how to combat this epidemic that I'm seeing.
yeah, it's the thing I'm most passionate about right now is micronutrient deficiency. Because like you
Great.
said, you're seeing it a lot in your practice, but then we also know 95% of Americans are deficient in one or more nutrients according to the USDA. And I'd say
Yes.
basically we're all just nutrient deficient. And like he said, our body wants to feel safe. And when we don't have the micronutrients, and that just means the vitamins, the minerals, the amino acids, and the essential fatty acids, there's about 40 of them that our body needs to thrive, we're in a stressed state. So rather than releasing weight, our body's going to hold on to our weight because it thinks, you know what, I might need this later and I don't have high quality options. And so the other reason it's really scary is because in the literature, beyond weight loss, it's tied to disease. We know that just one amazing example, if you're vitamin D deficient, you have a 222% increased risk of breast cancer as a woman,
Wow.
according to one study, and over 230% increased risk of colorectal cancer. And we know CoQ10 tied to heart disease, even in severity, like the more severe your deficiency of CoQ10, the more severe your heart disease symptoms. Huge issue. And I think, yes, part of it is coming from not eating enough. Part of
Mhm.
it is coming from just not making high quality choices, not being mindful of nutrient density. I don't think we were ever really trained that calorie is a calorie, right? Well,
Mhm.
it's just not the case at all. And like you
No.
said, if your body's not getting what it needs, then it's shutting down all of those awesome things that it could do, like burning fat and possibly reproduction. And the other really thing, I think this is so nerdy and interesting, but I'm just going to tell you because I think you're super nerdy too. Have you ever heard of Dr. Bruce Ames?
Sounds familiar, but I'm not quite familiar with the work.
Okay, the triage theory of micronutrient deficiency.
Okay.
Basically, we'll take something when your body doesn't have the minerals, the micronutrients that it needs, it's going to triage. So you have like a burning building over here with 100 kids, and you have just a house fire over here.
Mhm.
Obviously, you're going to divert your resources to the house burning down with the children. And that's exactly
Right.
what happens in our body with these micronutrients. So take vitamin K, for example, vitamin K1. It's going to clot your blood, which is obviously if you cut your finger and you don't have those proteins activated, you're going to bleed out. But it
Right.
also takes the calcium out of your arteries. Okay. So what happens, which is a big risk factor for heart disease, if you have calcium lingering, it's not a good thing. So what happens when you deplete someone of K1, you're only going to get that platelet activation or the blood clotting, but none of your calcium is going to be taken out of your arteries. So basically, your body will prioritize your short-term survival for your long-term health, for these things like disease prevention, for these things like reproduction, and for these things like fat burning. And so,
Wow.
yes, eating enough, really important. Maybe even more important is making sure that you're making those super nutrient dense choices. Organ meats, nature's multivitamins. I know they're disgusting and I have them in
Absolutely.
my diet every day, even though I don't eat them because we created our organ complex. So, and also leafy greens, things from the sea, seaweed, all the fatty
Yes.
fish, all these things that are super high in minerals. And also another thing I want to talk about on this topic is the soil. Basically,
Mm.
our soil is really, really depleted. And when our soil is depleted, so is our food. So another project that we have over here is called Wild Pastures. And so we're pairing with farmers in America that are using these agricultural methods that actually sequester carbon and they
Yes.
build the topsoil. So basically we have a microbiome, so does the earth. And the earth's
Mhm.
microbiome is really struggling. And so we need to be really mindful of the kinds of products that we're buying, and what the farmers are doing and how these products are being made so that we can replenish the soil. So we have a wild pastures project going on that we're going to do delivery service for the highest quality meats, but make it domestic. So there's other projects out there and they're sourcing internationally, and I know why. I totally get it, but we
Mhm.
want to make we want to support the farmers doing it here. So, and last thing, gut health. Like we said, if you're not eating, even if you're finding the super nutrient dense foods and you're spending your hard-earned dollars, but you're not absorbing it, it's just not going to matter. So I think for all of those reasons, it's a huge epidemic. And that is one of the reasons we made our organ complex. I was pregnant and I knew I needed to eat organs. I couldn't for the life of me.
I don't like them either. It's so
no,
tough.
I froze liver and made it to little balls, just like Chris Kresser said. And I couldn't keep it up. So we put him into capsules, grass-fed, grass-finished liver, and kidney and heart. And we had brain in there for a while, and we were sourcing that internationally because, obviously, mad cow disease. But we took that out because we weren't able to provide it to as many people when we had to wait on that shipment all the time. So basically heart, kidney, and liver is what you're going to get these days from our complex. But it's amazing. The amount of
I've had it. Yeah, it's fantastic. And I mean, there's so many great points there from everything from, I mean, even like you said, the USDA is saying that people are micronutrient deficiency. And we know that the RDA isn't enough. It's just to prevent disease. So which means that it's even worse than that. And then you talk about the soil, and we're both mutual friends and big time supporters of Diana Rogers and the work she's doing with regenerative agriculture. It's so important. And another quick thing I want to touch on with you, because I know we're up against a little bit of a time restraint here, but the issue of saying a starvation diet, let's say 800 to 900 calories, whatever, the calories definitely don't tell the whole story, because you could be eating 3,000 calories a day. If 60% of it is from refined carbohydrates, you're going to still have a micronutrient deficiency, which brings me to the point of these kind of hyper-palatable foods. And I want to get into this because there are so many moms that listen to this show that are in the Clovis community. And what I want to touch on is I really don't think a lot of these moms understand how powerful their buying habits are. Like if you go to the store and you buy or get online and buy Paleo Valley beef sticks instead of Pringles, you're really sending a message to big food. Really, you're voting with your dollars, and we have to just get at least our children out of this space where we are setting them up for lifelong micronutrient deficiency through these hyperpalatable, non-nutrient dense foods that kids are snacking on.
Oh, I know it's such a problem as a mom. And I am so grateful that I had this knowledge before I embarked on this wonderful adventure of motherhood, because when my little one, I don't want him to never have anything, any processed foods, whatever he's tried it. He is a different boy, and the literature is out there. When you feed them these hyperpalatable foods, they are set up, like you said, for failure. Their risk of obesity increases. I mean, ADHD and all of these emotional issues are also a problem. And I don't think enough people understand. I have these ads on Facebook, and I'm always talking about the detrimental effects of sugar, and moderation is the key, is what I always get as a response.
Right. But, always.
I know, always. And it's like, no, these foods are designed by food scientists who understand your brain very well. And they try like hundreds of different combinations, find out which one will addict you the most. And then that's the one they sell. And so you cannot a lot of times do these foods in moderation. Their all of your neural pathways are hijacked. And all of a sudden you expect these foods. I get into this trap myself. So I get off the rails for a little bit, and it takes, a few weeks to get back, because I have to be so trained and so diligent about, no, I know that I don't really need these foods. This is just my brain going haywire. And this is the dopamine being released in response to this. This is exactly what food manufacturers are doing. So I think childhood is such an important time, and I don't let him. If he's going to have a treat, I usually make it. And it's usually something like fruit and, like coconut milk or some sort of popsicle. And we just have really strict rules about, this is not what we eat for breakfast. We have protein for breakfast, and we have some sort of like collagen and fat tea for breakfast. And it's, like I said, when we don't feed him well, he's a different child, and his body is developing. I think your body, by the time you're 2, your brain is developed to like 80%. But by the time there's like this huge opportunity to profoundly influence the way that development happens. And I'm just so glad I knew about it before. And I invite anyone who is just like wondering if it matters to just try it, and just keep adding things, your child will adjust. Sometimes they don't get to eat exactly what they want, but you're actually doing them a favor in the long term.
Absolutely. And it's common sense to a certain point where you have to look at it and say, okay, I did this whole segment once that got me into some trouble, but all my segments do. But this idea that your children are addicts, that's what it is. Like, I've known some alcoholics in my life. I don't tell them to just have a drink every now and then, just drink in moderation. These kids are addicts because you and I can say, oh, this is bad for me, and understand that consequence. Like my little nephew, Jackson, he's 6. He doesn't care if he has 6-pack abs. So if I say, hey, Jackson, that soda's not good for you, he's going to look at me and say, but Uncle Justin, it tastes good. He doesn't understand the consequence. So it's up to you to protect that child. Not this, you give it to him sometimes, everything in moderation. It's so foolish. I get really mad about it. So I did this whole thing. Your children are addicts and you have to protect them from that. Like you said, you're literally hijacking their neural pathways.
Yes. And then you're setting up their taste preferences for the rest of their life. And what I found really works is not, okay, you can't have this anymore. No, but educating them. My little guy's about 3. He's starting to get it. I'd always be like, because the other day he had popcorn. We went over to a party and it was just there and he loves it. And the next day he will always get a toothache. And I say, what, sweetie pie? Like, this is because of popcorn, because his dad has the same thing. And then he goes, oh, thought about it for a second, and the next time we saw it, he didn't ask for it. And gluten is a big issue for him too. And we went to a birthday party, and I brought my own cupcake. I was diligent, I did it, but there was ice cream cake and he really wanted it. I let him eat it. And so the next day he got, I think it was 2 days later, he got a cold sore. And he said, Mama, my lip hurt. And I said, you know what, sweetie? Because it's a common association you see a lot of times, like B vitamin deficiency or cold sores. And so now he's starting to make those associations on his own. And so it's not this uphill battle and constant fight. It's like, this is how this affects your health, and you've got a choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Okay. So I know I'm taking too much of your time here. I'm being selfish.
No, I love it.
But I have one more thing that I need to touch on, and it may be about nutrition. It may get out of the realm of nutrition. There's been this incredible movement almost that I've seen in the Clovis community where women figure out this nutrition end of things. They have their light bulb moment. I've gotten many women to what they would call their quote unquote goal weight, right? So we have these discussions called life after success, what to do when you get to the place that you never thought you'd get to. And this incredible thing has happened that's just blown my mind. And I want to talk to you about it specifically because I cannot tell you how much I respect the work that you've done personally with Radiate and 28, with Paleovalley, your whole family, Chaz. It's incredible. So what has happened with these women, many of them reach their goal weight. They feel this sense of self-empowerment, quit their jobs, and become entrepreneurs. I have multiple testimonies like this now in the Clovis community. So, and I'm so big on personal care and self-care and daily habits and rituals and routines. So I just want to give them a glimpse into the world of Autumn Smith as a high-performing female entrepreneur. What has really stuck with you, and what are these daily habits and rituals that help you be such a high-level performer?
Oh, I love that question. Because it's funny to hear yourself considered to be a high level performer, but thank you for that. And it's funny because that's my story. Like, I was working for Tracy Anderson. I had an awesome job, but when I had this revelation, I was like, no, but I can do so much more. And I have this story that I need to share. And so the things that have obviously moved the needle most for me is, just keeping my diet in check when I can, but also having fun with my life sometimes, making sure that I always eat foods that I definitely sincerely enjoy. Wow, yoga. Man, yoga. It's a daily thing in my life. Even if I'm not able to do it every day, I am doing my deep breathing, my nostril breathing. That is definitely a huge part of my life. Also, my cold showers in the morning. My husband thinks I'm a psycho, but you guys, this is crazy. And if, all you have to do is like stick your little hand in for 5 seconds, and then your wrist, and then your elbow. You can just kind of work it around. It doesn't need to be like all or nothing, but wow, my sense of well-being is incredible when I'm done. I just feel uninflamed. It's funny. Maybe it's just because I know that I am, but so that, and it activates your relaxation response. It's life-changing for me. Also, I do a once a week, 24-hour fast. This isn't necessarily something that everyone needs to do. And definitely not if you're on medication like metformin, and
Hmm.
you got to check with your doctor.
All the
But
disclaimers. Yep.
all the disclaimers. But for my mental health, I can't even tell you. I used to think, oh, I'm going to regret it. And I just go after Thursday dinner, I don't eat until Friday dinner. And I am never happier than I am that Friday afternoon. I don't know what it does. Helps me to slow down. It gives me all of this mental bandwidth to think of the more important things in my life, like being present with my little guy. And I know, obviously I'm reducing inflammation. I'm getting in touch with my actual appetite before the weekend, I found, which is really a good idea because it can go
Great idea.
crazy. And the last piece is just taking a little bit of a social media, electronics fast every single day from 3 to 5. I'm mommy with my little guy, no phones to be seen, not checking anything. I'm just completely unplugged. And that's really made a difference for me too. Just learning about him and just fasting, or knowing that a certain part of the day I am not available to anyone. And I guess there is one more. My husband and I do this thing because we have a little one, and we're both needing a little more me time. So we do something called the Sunday swap. So he gets 2 hours to do whatever he wants, and then I get 2 hours to do whatever I want every single week. And so that's kind of a non-negotiable, and it's helped us. I take baths. Usually I just go and take a salt bath and put my legs up the wall, and I listen to classical music, and I hang out, and then I do a really awesome workout. So exercise obviously is another big piece of my puzzle. I've got a lot of rituals, I'm realizing. But those are what helps me. And HRV testing too. Have you ever talked about that?
I haven't gone deep in it, but I've been practicing it for a very long time.
Good.
Yeah.
It's just for someone who is like a type A, like, oh, I'm just going to keep going and going because I don't need rest. I'm the exception to that rule. It helps it's just like a simple reading you can do every morning. And I know there are chest straps you can wear. There's also something called this app called HRV for training. You just use your finger, super simple. Every morning you just take a reading, and it kind of tells you, hey, do you need rest?
Right.
Or are you at your best? And you can kind of put the pedal to the metal. So I think a lot of us are disconnected from our bodies, disembodied, I call it. And I was one of them. But this has helped me kind of climb back in and say yes to those days of just total relaxation and not feel bad about it.
I could not love those answers more, really. I mean, you made me so happy because I've been harping on the Clovis community forever about cold showers. I've practiced them for years. I've done the Wim Hof method. And interesting enough, because you brought up HRV, what you're doing for those people listening that aren't quite familiar with some of these things is with your deep breathing, with your yoga, with your cold showers, all of these things, you're activating that parasympathetic nervous system, which is just so important for overall. It's basically your rest and digest, as you know. So I love those answers. I mean, that's really what you have to do. You have to find the balance. You can't just be hard driving 100% of the time. So I hope that these brand new female entrepreneurs, if you can take anything away, society kind of glorifies workaholism, and I've fallen into it, and you need to find that balance. So adopt some of these principles that Autumn's talking about. This just beautiful answers.
Yeah, it's so important because my husband is like this guy. He moves really slow. He's very thoughtful, very meticulous. Nothing will be done until every angle has been considered. And I've always been the opposite. And like when we first got together, it would drive me crazy. It's like, just make a decision, just act. We have to be in motion. And what I realized is, man, was I wrong? And the more I sit and reflect and give my body what it needs and let it rest, you get that creativity, you get that bird's eye view, but not when you run yourself ragged. So yeah.
We have an awful lot in common. That's been my biggest challenge for the last several years. So it's so funny. We have such similar routines and rituals and all these things. It's awesome.
That's why we're friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
I liked you when I met you. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So last but not least, please just tell people where they can find you. Where can they get these amazing Paleo Valley products? Where can they learn about you, talk to you one-on-one? Give us all the links.
Yes. Come to paleovalley.com. That's going to go through our support system. You can also reach out to me directly at Autumn, AUTUM at paleovalley.com. I like to hear from any and all of you. If I said something that interested you, if I said something that made you angry, whatever, just let me know. I'm always welcome to a lot of feedback. Our meat delivery service will be called Wild Pastures. That will be launched. It's a whole different thing in November. And we do have a super greens powder. We also got into bar manufacturing. We just started our own facility because people weren't doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
And we just realized quality control has to be under our control because we care so very much. So be looking for those products. We also have some supplements coming out. We're always doing something over there. So come over anytime. And Justin, thank you for having me on. It's been such an
Thank you.
honor.
Thank you so much. I love everything you guys are doing. I love that you're getting into bars because bars are very scary. So I'm excited. I want to try those out. Thank you for coming on the show. And hopefully we can do this again. Let's do a part 2 sometime.
I would love that.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Autumn. Have an amazing day.
You too.